Here we have the assignment that you should work on come the completion of this course. What we're going to get you to do is perform a question asking audit. And what that means is if you have had classes before, excellent. Observe one of your own class recordings using the playback button on Future Cloud, and then write down questions that you asked. From there, you're going to categorize the questions that you realized you were asking according to Bloom's taxonomy. So using that video and the question flowchart that I showed you before, try to fit them into the different areas, and then evaluate the diversity and the balance of your questioning practices. If you haven't had a chance to have a class yet, or for whatever reason you can't watch one of the playbacks of your classes, then skip the observation and just use one of the PowerPoints for the lessons, the materials, and see if you can think about the questions and write down the questions you would ask a student in that situation. And then you can categorize them accordingly. So same thing, just skip number 1 and substitute the observation with a PowerPoint of the materials. So from there, you have your raw material. You're going to build your question asking toolkit. Here, I want you to create and categorize the list of questions that you might ask students in any given situation. This one's a little bit tougher because you don't necessarily have a specific set of materials in front of you or a class observation to form these questions. But what I essentially mean by this is that you should anticipate in a class the types of questions that are very effective. Hopefully some of the examples in the closed and the open questions have given you some ideas. Like, I'm going to use compare and contrast questions. How is like How is different than And that way you can kind of just fill in the blanks with whatever you might need in that situation, but you can sort of already have an idea about what you think might be effective in your own classroom. From there, just make sure that you're evaluating them and assessing them according to Bloom's taxonomy. So you can see the earlier video, or you can mix and match and compare to your evaluation of diversity from step 1. Step 3 is going to be cultivating your question asking style. So you have the raw material from 2 separate sources. Now take a look at not only what questions are being asked, but how they're being asked. So if you've had a chance to evaluate yourself, awesome. Take a look at your own body language, take an ear at, listen to the way that you talk and deliver these questions in the video so that you can make sure that you don't sound too aggressive or whatnot, or maybe you notice that your eyes are really closed that day and you want to make them a little bit wider because the student looked like they were also falling asleep. Write that down, and if you hadn't had a chance to observe your class, then write down a list of what you want to be more conscious and aware of in your classroom, like shoulders back, open eyes, a neutral facial expression with maybe a little bit of a smile. You should use your hands a lot more when you're explaining something, etc. So if you're at least aware of it and you're getting that process underway where you're thinking about these things, it's going to become a lot more natural and intuitive when you're actually in the classroom then, and you're coming to these actions over there. Finally, consider the phrasing and the choice of words that you're using. And I've already talked about the nonverbal communication, but also the reaction time that you're using. So if you're sitting there, and granted, internet delays aside, those ones, the students can kind of gauge a natural reaction time, even based on that. Like, it takes 3 seconds for them to hear me, therefore it's going to take 3 seconds for her to react, and there she goes. So they'll still get a natural sense of timing that way. But if, all things considered, you have a regular playback time and the student says something and you're maybe a little distracted, maybe you're writing notes for the feedback later on, and then you react and you're, oh yeah, that was really funny, it's going to seem a little bit weird. And the student's going to notice that you're not really keeping them and their answers at the forefront of your mind. So do consider your reaction time, do consider that nonverbal communication from before, and do consider your phrasing and the types of words that you choose. So making sure that they're not too complicated and that the structure it doesn't have too many clauses and subjective whatnots and conditional everythings, grammar. Just make sure to keep it simple. Finally, I want you to further refine your technique. So this is more of an ongoing thing, since in the context of this particular course, it's something more long-term that you won't be able to do offhand. Debrief yourself after each class. Assuming that students are registering with you and you have a fairly regular flow of classes, this is something that you should maybe assess at the same time that you're writing your student feedback. Think about how they were reacting to your questions and sort of double up. You're writing feedback for the student, but you're also writing feedback in your head about yourself and taking note about what questions were effective. Also, think about the sequence of questions that you're asking. So they should vaguely follow either a simple to complex strategy or a general to specific strategy. So you have to be aiming in one of those directions, and if you do, probably your learning objectives are also going to be on point. So make sure that you're using sequences of questions in an effective way. And finally, come up with alternatives to do you have any questions? So just the same as do you understand, this is probably not going to get an honest answer because the student very well might have questions, but they probably are also a little bit shy about asking them. Maybe they don't know how to phrase them. It's something that you need to work around. Get to know your students' body language, get to know that look in their eye when they don't understand. They definitely have questions. They just may not be stimulated enough or confident enough to ask them. So even though this is an assignment for this course, this should be done regularly. So it's not just a one-off for this foundational training course, it is for always. All of your teaching career past, I'm gonna say past and future, present and future. Past is kind of a bit out of your control now, but essentially, you will have a PDF and a download of this assignment for you to better clarify the steps that we want you to take. So just take a look at that next and make sure you download it and complete it to consider this course complete.